Thanks, Chair. We're live. Over to you.
Lovely. So to make attendees aware, when the meeting goes live and being on webcast, you will appear in the top. It appears in the top left-hand screen, saying live on YouTube. So just be aware that we are live and that everybody can see what everything's going on. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this remote meeting of the Inner East Community Committee. My name's Councillor Denise Reagan, and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. The Inner East Community Committee covers the Bermontos and Richmond Hill, Gipton and Hare Hills and Killingbeck and Seacroft wards, and is a committee where ward councillors have an opportunity to discuss and make decisions about services and priorities for the local area, and also consider funding applications regarding local community projects and youth activities. I would like to start the meeting today by confirming that today's community committee meets the requirements of the council's constitution, even though members are in remote attendance, and that members of the public are able to view the meeting via the live webcasting. As we begin the meeting, could I ask all attendees, like I've said, to mute the microphones unless I invite them to speak. So if you're wanting to come in to speak, can you just show on your raised hand function, and then the office will alert me to who needs to speak. And this will avoid disruption and background noise. Members wishing to ask a question can make comment, should do so by using the raised hand facility, like I've said. Can I take this opportunity to, in the order that I may lose connection, we need to appoint a vice chair. So I propose that we appoint a vice chair who could step in during, if this does take place, and I move that Councillor Salma Arif is vice chair and will take over if I lose connection. And can I invite a member to second that motion, please?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Camilla. Could I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves, and you mute your microphone once you have introduced yourself. I'll start with Councillor Graham. Do you want to introduce yourself, Ron?
Councillor Ron Graham, Bermontos and Richmond Hill ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Khan.
Hi, good evening. Councillor Asghar Khan for Bermontos and Richmond Hill ward.
Councillor Salma Arif.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Salma Arif and I represent Gipton and Hare Hills.
Councillor Arif Hussain. Councillor Arif Hussain, are you there? Move on. Councillor Camilla Maqsood.
Good evening, everybody. Councillor Camilla Maqsood from the Gipton and Hare Hills ward.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Drinkwater.
Councillor Paul Drinkwater, Killingbeck and Seacroft ward.
Councillor Katie Dye.
Hello everyone, Councillor Katie Dye for Killingbeck and Seacroft.
And finally, but not least, Councillor David Jenkins.
Hi, I'm Councillor David Jenkins from Killingbeck and Seacroft ward.
Have we managed to connect with Councillor Arif? No, right. Can I introduce officers then and take it in turns? Ruth.
Hi everyone, so I'm Ruth Tiernan and I'm the Localities Officer for the Inner East Community Committee.
Liz. Is Liz Jarman on the call?
I am on the call, Councillor Reagan. Good evening everybody, Liz Jarman, Head of Stronger Communities.
Thank you. Natasha.
Thanks, Chair. Natasha Prosser, Clerk to the Inner East Community Committee.
Thank you. Grace.
Hi, Grace Young, Sports Officer for the Inner East Community Committee.
Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Hardy, Service Manager for Cleaner Neighbourhoods in East.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Jonathan Moxon, Leeds City Council Flood Risk Manager.
And finally, Sunita.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Sunita Jamat, and I'm a Domestic Violence Programme Officer, and I work for the Safer Leeds Safeguarding and Domestic Violence team.
Thank you, everyone, for that. Moving on to the agenda, could I now ask Natasha for you to go through agenda items 1 to 6, please?
Yep, sure, Chair, thank you. So under agenda item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under agenda item number 2, there are no items which require the exclusion of the press and public. Under agenda item number 3, I'm not aware of any late items of business. However, some supplementary information was circulated to members prior to the meeting in regards to the domestic violence update report and the finance report. Could I just ask if members received that via email? Thank you. I'll take silence as none.
Yes.
And then under agenda item number 4, thank you. Can I please ask members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests? Again, I'll take silence as none. And under agenda item number 5, I've not received any apologies for absence. And under agenda item number 6, this is where we'd usually have the open forum. But on this occasion, we've not received any written submissions from the public. Chair, back to you.
Lovely. So on to the agenda, item 7 is the minutes of the last formal meeting. So the last formal meeting was held on the 5th of December 2019. That seems years ago. Do members accept these minutes as a true record? And again, I'll assume correct unless I'm indicated otherwise. I'm moving on to agenda item 8. Are there any matters arising from these minutes in December 2019? David?
Okay, so item 44, matters arising. Minute 25, pool estate development. Just to say that Katie Dye, Councillor Dye, and I had a meeting with Strata and Keepmoat and some residents recently to look at whether we could do any more green space development within the area. But it's more likely to be that any green space development which is going to benefit the community of Pool Estate will be on the Seacroft Hospital site. So there is plans for a play area and plans to restrict the access to motorbikes and so on with the use of chicanes, and so there are plans to improve the area. So I thought that was important to mention.
So can we take a note of that then, Natasha?
Yep, it's noted, Chair. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Anybody else got any matters arising? David, can I ask you to, thank you, that's lovely, so we know. Ideally then, so we're now moving on to agenda item 9. So Jonathan, I'd like to invite you to speak to your update, please, on the Wybeck flood defences.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Reagan. I know you've invited me along following an update I provided to you at an exec member briefing. So I've done a few slides, which I was just going to talk through, and then I'm happy to take any questions if that sounds all right.
That sounds perfect.
We'll see if the technology allows. I'm going to try and share my screen, so we'll see how it goes. Can people now see a slide? Probably just need a couple of notes. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm Jonathan Moxon. I'm the council's flood risk manager. So I have an overview across the city in terms of the measures that we take to try and reduce flood risk, the property and to communities. And we do a range of things. For anybody that's not aware, we have a statutory function under the Flood and Water Management Act to advise through planning and approve plans through planning that in relation to flood risk. We build schemes, we maintain schemes, we investigate flooding incidents, and obviously we support businesses and members of the public to try and reduce their flood risk or to help them deal with flood risk if we can't try and reduce it. So what I was going to do is provide an update on a scheme that we've been doing in East Leeds along the Whitebeck Valley. Covers a few different sites. We've been planning this and implementing it for a lot of years now, and we're just about finished. So it's just an update on that and a chance for you to ask any questions. So the Whitebeck Valley itself runs from Roundy Park Lake, or starts officially there, and runs right down through to the River Aire, downstream of the city centre. And along the way, we've been looking to reduce flood risk in that area for a lot of years. And we were able to pull a package of works together, working with a few outside bodies, but also a number of departments within the council. So the Brownfield Land Programme was looking to develop land in this catchment and bring that forward for housing growth. Parks and Countryside colleagues were looking to make improvements to existing local nature reserves and green spaces generally in terms of accessibility, just as the point that was raised by Councillor Jenkins there. We've been looking at that for a long time, and this project looked to try and enable some of that as well as reduce flood risk. So as a flood risk team, we're very interested in not just doing flood risk projects that only do flood risk things. We're always looking for opportunities to bring in multiple sources of funding to do multiple benefit projects. So this particular one looked to support housing growth, improve green infrastructure and biodiversity and accessibility, and obviously reduce flood risk where we could as well. Many of you will already be very aware, probably more aware than I am, of the impacts of flooding on the communities in this part of Leeds. They've suffered on a number of occasions, and although the Whitebeck is actually a main river, so by sort of statutory law, that's the remit of the Environment Agency. We've worked with the Environment Agency, but we actually took a lead as a local authority because we felt we were better placed to deliver a scheme that had a few other benefits. We were particularly focused on reducing the risk in the Dunhills estate. They've been hit a number of times. On the right hand side there, there's a picture of what looks like a World War II air raid siren up on a massive pole, which is pretty much what it is. And that does sound when the Environment Agency issues a flood warning in that area, that siren sounds. It's the only one in Leeds. It's one of only a few in West Yorkshire, but that signifies how I suppose how much of a priority flood risk is in this part of the catchment. And the schemes that we were going to bring forward was hoping to try and reduce the chances of a repeat of the pictures there that you can see. What we settled on were 3 different sites: Arthur's Rain, Killingbeck Meadows and Halton Moor. Those were the names we gave them. They're in the rough locations that you can see on the plan there. And each of these schemes basically managed flood risk, but also improved habitat through planting, access improvements, improvements to sort of grassland and meadows, and also critically managed surface water runoff from some of the developments that were coming forward. And I can touch on that in a bit. You may get a little bit of child noise in the background, but that's par for the course now, isn't it? So the kids are in the lounge, so we'll see how we go. This is the first of the sites. This is Arthur's Rain. So you mentioned this strata homes development just before. So one of those sites was looking to do some re-culverting works at Arthur's Rain, so just downstream. So this was an existing local nature reserve, open green space, and to allow the houses to be built and to manage the surface water runoff from that site that would enter this watercourse that then goes into the Whitebeck, they needed to make a culvert bigger, and they were going to pay to do that. And we had a better plan than that. So what we've managed to do is actually make it a culvert's a pipe basically that's under the ground. We wanted to make that into an open channel and make it visible to the public, make it greener, make it more accessible and a better quality green space. So that's what we've managed to do. So shortly after the scheme had finished, it looked like the top picture, and then the second picture is just it's really greened up and it's got lovely wildflower meadows. We've done a lot of planting there with Parks and Countryside, and it's reduced flood risk as well. So we delivered that project on behalf of the contractor. They paid money towards this, and that was a key element to this whole scheme. So what we basically did is agreed payments from a lot of the housing developers to manage their surface water flood risk on their behalf. But by doing that, we attracted a lot of other funding as well. and we were able to put together nearly £5 million worth of package of works to do things like this, whereas the developers on their own wouldn't have the incentive to do a project in this way. That's just a closer look. So basically there are paths throughout the site. There are lots of trees, fresh trees planted, and that's now a site that's managed as a local nature reserve by colleagues in Parks and Countryside. The flood risk assets are managed by my teams. This is an animated slide, so we will see whether this works or not. So the scheme at Killingbeck Meadows is the major bit of the investment in the site, so probably the best part of £2 or £3 million, depending on how you look at the infrastructure payments. The planting and the landscaping still going on over this winter, and we did have a big programme of community engagement with schools and community groups to help with the tree planting and the vegetation management, and that's still planned. It'll have to come once the pandemic has calmed down, which is a shame we didn't get a chance to do that last year. But in the middle of that site now, we've got what is a flood storage reservoir, so we have to manage that under quite tight regulations as a proper reservoir under the Reservoirs Act. And again, flood risk management do that bit, and Parks and Countryside help us by managing the green space. But what that does is hold floodwater when we've got heavy rains in the park bit, and keeps that water out of homes, which is critical to this. But the rest of the time, when Whitebeck's not flooding, it's a lovely green space and it's accessible to the public, and we were able to make a lot of improvements both from a biodiversity point of view and an accessibility point of view. I'll try and play a time-lapse video. We had a time-lapse camera set up on one of the flats, on the top of the block of flats, and it took some pictures while we were working. See if this plays. It's got music as well, I didn't realise. So let this play through, but in the middle there, we're building a brand new concrete control structure. And then at the bottom here is the old course of the river, and we've moved that through this new structure. So we've moved the whole of the Whitebeck there. We had to relocate crayfish, and we did a massive crayfish rescue at the early part of the project. I just want to highlight what was really sad actually as part of the project is crayfish are an endangered species in this country. And when we came to do the main works on the project, we were all set for about 3 weeks worth of crayfish rescue. And actually no crayfish were present at all. And so it has actually prompted, there is actually quite a big problem along the Whitebeck that species has had to move and migrate. We think that is down to a crayfish plague, which is carried by an invasive American American crayfish, signal crayfish. So from a biodiversity point of view, the project being there has actually highlighted quite a significant issue there that we're working with the Environment Agency. So either side of the concrete box in the middle, we've built a brand new flood bank. That's an engineered structure that we will manage. And that's what holds the water back. So the box in the middle controls the amount of water that goes downstream. To the left of the picture, there's a lot of ponds and scrapes that are there all the time, and they're wetted up quite frequently. But the floodwater only really starts to fill up in quite much. This picture just sort of shows you that we've got throughout the site. There's a series of smaller little ponds and sections of river, and they stay wet most of the year. And then in the flood, the picture on the right there just shows you that the whole of that area is flooded. But a lot of the new paths that we've put through the site are outside of that area, so the site is still available to the public even when it's flooding. This is just a quick picture of just as we'd finished. So we did do a site visit with a lot of the ward members. There are 3 wards that intersect at this location, so we took out the ward members and a couple of other organisations that were interested in the work and showed them around the site. But it has actually greened up quite a lot now, and it looks even better than this now. But it is fully operational, and we're closely monitoring the site. But it has already operated a few times and protected those properties. Holton Moor was the final site out of the 3, and that largely was about tree planting, environmental improvements in and around the areas around the schools, and the green space there, and that work is largely finished. And this is just a summary of sort of some of the other benefits that we've done as part of that project. So we created a number of apprenticeships and jobs indirectly, but a small number as well directly through the work itself. 8,000 new trees will go in at Killingbeck Meadows, which is not a small amount in an urban setting. So we're very proud of the amount of trees that we've been able to implement on there. Obviously, we did remove a number of larger willows and mature trees, so we're conscious that we've had to mitigate for that, but we've certainly planted a huge amount more trees than we needed to just do for mitigation. There's been an improvement there, and one of the key benefits of the scheme is enabling that brownfield land programme and enabling that housing growth, which is hugely needed in this area. But obviously we want that doing in a sympathetic way, and this is a good way of, in effect, creating a massive sustainable drainage system in the middle of the valley, rather than trying to ask each developer to do their own solution on each site. And that's my final slide.
Thank you, Jonathan. Do members have any questions on that particular presentation? If they have, can they use the raised hand function, please? Yeah, Asger, and then David.
Thanks, Chair. Jonathan, thank you for the presentation. My question is regarding maintenance. Who's going to keep the maintenance of the beck? And also, you mentioned about seating. As you know, in the East, we do have a high number of antisocial behaviour. And do you reckon the seating will attract antisocial behaviour from young people gathering in the evenings and during night time?
Can we ask David's questions as well, and then take both? You can answer both then, Jonathan. David?
Yes, it's similar in a way. I mean, I think it's a groundbreaking scheme, if that's not a pun, and I think it looks amazing. Well, it's beginning to look amazing, because at the time when we visited, there were lots of stones, and the greenery hadn't sort of surfaced. But I think we have to be aware of the issue of antisocial behaviour. And at one end, at the Arthur's Rain end, it's been attracting the odd quad bike and motorbikes. So I think we just need to make sure that we cover that, and make sure that the chicanes are in place to try and discourage such antisocial behaviour.
Just before you answer, Jonathan, I've got Councillor Salma Arif to ask a question, and then you can answer those 3 questions together. Salma?
Thank you, Jonathan. Can I just thank you for that presentation? It was very concise, and I liked the video. It looked really great. I've got a question. It said on the final slide that you created 318 jobs and 20 apprentices. Were they local jobs?
So, right, Jonathan, you can ask those. You can answer those 3 questions now, if you will.
I shall try. Yes, thank you. So I think roughly taking them in order, the maintenance of the beck itself, because the White Beck is a main river from about just where the A58 goes across it down to the River Aire. So that's the overarching beck maintenance is still the responsibility of the Environment Agency. However, the new assets, the new flood risk assets, and the bits particularly within Killingbeck Meadows, but all 3 sites, the council attracted funding as part of the deal for the whole project to do maintenance going forward. So with many of these things, the capital funding was there for the whole amount. The maintenance funding largely is going to last, say, for the next 10 years for the green space. But yeah, we've taken on a new responsibility basically. So all the new flood risk assets that we built there, the flood risk management team will look after, and Parks and Countryside were already managing Killingbeck Meadows, Arthur's Rain and Holton Moor in conjunction with Yorkshire Wildlife Trust as part of the park sort of partnership. So that continues, and we're just working more closely now with Parks on the assets. So I hope that answers that question. Seating, and I suppose seating and generally antisocial behaviour and access for quad bikes and motorbikes. that's the balance we've got to strike, isn't it? That you want to, you know, for some people, hopefully the small minority, want to abuse the site, and I think we are already seeing that at all 3 sites. We're certainly getting a lot of interest in the new assets at Killingbeck Meadows. Whenever you put a big engineering structure in the middle of a green space, everybody wants to come and play. And I think particularly young people are using it as a climbing frame and as a place to ride motorbikes. And I had a meeting yesterday actually with Parks and Countryside colleagues about what I would like to see is that we've at least assessed each of these sites to make sure that the measures that we should have in place, chicanes, fencing, signage, are in place, and that's something we're following up on. I'm fairly confident they are, but I think we need to keep a close eye on that. I think the structure itself at Killingbeck Meadows is receiving a lot of attention, but not as much now as it did when we first put it in. So we need to keep an eye on that. It could be that the interest will wane. Could be just that it's cold and the kids are not out as often. But I think with the kids not being at school now for the next few weeks, we need to keep a close eye on their interest in the structure. Some of the structures like fencing that we've put in to keep the public safe, they've removed. So we've probably 3 or 4 times now we've had to put chains and fencing back up. So that's something we're very aware of. It's a common problem, you know, working in public space. You guys will know that as well as I will. So we need to see if there's more we can do, then fine. But it's a fine balance between making it fully accessible for everybody that can go and appreciate the green space and making it inaccessible for people that go and ruin it for everybody else. So yeah, I haven't got probably any more concrete answers than that, but we are very aware of the issues that it's bringing at the moment.
Asger, do you want to come back on that or anything? Asger, did you get that? Do you want to come back?
No, I'm happy, Chair. The answer from Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And then the final question was about jobs, wasn't it? And apprentices and whether they were local. So there were 4 jobs and 2 apprentices that were taken on as a direct result of the construction works. So they were the works were developed and delivered by Colas, our term contractor, and Jackson Civils. And from my understanding, part of their contract is about apprentices that are locally employed. Although I think that's something that we're strengthening in our future procurement contracts, that local labour needs to be a preference. But the wider jobs are local because the 318 jobs and the apprentices that go with them are about land in the valley that is better protected from flooding, that promotes the sustainability of those businesses. So this is, I suppose, a benefit I haven't touched on a lot because the benefit's it's quite minor in terms of flood risk, is about protecting the enterprise zone. It's about protecting existing businesses. It's really difficult to attract funding to protect existing businesses, which is really frustrating. We can attract a lot more funding if we can create new jobs. So there were some there, but actually we probably need to emphasize more the fact that by reducing the flood risk in the valley, we have actually safeguarded a lot more jobs than we create, which is obviously extremely important in itself. We just don't tend to crow about it because we can't claim a lot of funding for it. But yeah, the jobs, the larger figure for the jobs is about the jobs in the valley.
Councillor Dye, you've got a raised hand. Do you want to ask your question, please, before we move on to another item on the agenda?
Yes, I will. Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan. When we had a tour of the site, the Killingbeck site, I remember asking a question about the actual procedure of raising and sort of lowering flood defences, actually making it work when it happens. And I have a feeling somebody who I asked the question of said that it wasn't an automatic process, that somebody came and did it. And I'm just interested in a bit more of the technical side of how that works.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, actually, I wonder if they may not have quite got that right. Depends what, I can't answer for them, but this site's actually it is designed in a way that we don't have to come out and operate it. which I suppose, from my point of view, I'm always keen that we don't have active defences. In the city centre, as many of you will be aware, we've got these really fancy movable weirs. And as a result, I have a team on call 24/7 to be ready to operate those weirs or fix them if they fail. And we had to do that in the city centre. But our preference would always be that the flood scheme just looks after itself. And that is exactly what it does in the Whitebeck. So the new structure at Killingbeck Meadows is designed that the steel gate, what we call a penstock in the middle, can move up and down, but it's set at a level that lets an amount of water through that we're happy with. So the floodwaters will just come and fill the basin and go away again, and we won't have to touch that penstock in a flood. But for maintenance and things like that, we do come and move it up and down and make sure that it works. But yeah, the flood scheme works by itself. We don't have to come and do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. I can't see any more indications for questions. So thank you, Jonathan, for your very comprehensive presentation and answering the questions of the ward members. And thank you for attending tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. I'll leave you to it if that's okay.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Arif?
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know what's wrong with from the beginning of this meeting, and also just let you know, and I am in the meeting anyway.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Anyway.
Good evening. Thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on then to agenda item 10, and we've now got another presentation with regards to a domestic violence update, and I asked for this to be brought to this committee because I don't know if anybody else has been on the briefings of those domestic violence, and it was brought to our attention that the amount of domestic violence calls were up during COVID, and it was very high in Bermondsey, Richmond Hill, and in Gipton and Harells. And so we thought that it might be an idea to have this presentation here at the community committee to let members know what's actually ongoing and what the department are in connection with other partners are doing about it. So I'd like to welcome Sunita Jamat to deliver this presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors, and thank you to Councillor Reagan for inviting me to this meeting. So, as Councillor Reagan's mentioned, I'm here to talk about domestic violence, particularly in the Inner East Community Committee. And this is a conversation that first started back in January 2020 with the community committees, and due to COVID, obviously, you know, we've had to put that on hold, and we're kind of now re-establishing those connections with all the community committees, and we have recently done a presentation for the Inner South, and we will be going on to do further presentations for Inner West as well. But in terms of sort of Inner East, so what I'm hoping to do is, could we have the next slide, please? Provide you with a bit of an overview of the reported domestic violence and abuse in the East area and the rest of the city as well, how that compares with some key data as well about the impact that COVID-19 has had in relation to domestic violence and abuse. And I'm hoping to provide a snapshot of the current activity that's currently happening in the Inner East area, and in particular, the really good work that's been happening in the Seacroft area of the city, and what they're doing as a partnership to address domestic violence and abuse. And I believe Councillor Jenkins has been involved in that. I'm hoping to provide a summary of the, sorry, can we just go back a slide? Yeah, a summary of the implications of the new domestic abuse bill, and that's currently going through the House of Lords, and it just had its second reading last Tuesday, but it is progressing, and we're hoping that it becomes an act in April of this year, and what that means in terms of what the governance arrangements will look like in Leeds. And then finally, look at an opportunity to try and explore the role of the community committee in addressing domestic violence and abuse, sort of in the areas of high prevalence. But before I begin, can I just, something that we always start our sessions by is to acknowledge that people who are sort of currently listening in may be sort of directly or indirectly affected by domestic violence and abuse. They may have been exposed to it themselves, or they may have actually witnessed it in their own families. So when it comes to any questions or discussions, if we could just ask that you approach it with sensitivity. It is a very emotive subject, and I will be sort of giving you some data on the domestic homicides that have occurred in the city since 2011. But if you have been affected, please do reach out and do try to get some support through Leeds Domestic Violence Service, which is the commissioned domestic abuse service in Leeds. Could I have the next slide, please? So currently, the data that we have in Leeds is that there has been 18,180 police incidents that have been reported from the beginning of lockdown through to sort of the first week in January. Now we think that the projected figure is going to be more likely to be around 22,000, and that's quite common with previous years where the police have reported around 60 incidents per day. And we don't actually see that as a negative. We actually encourage more people to feel confident about reporting to the police, and we do see those numbers going up year on year, and we do take a little bit of comfort that victim survivors do feel confident in calling their situations into the police, and that the police are actively doing something about it. But that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg. We know that only 1 in 5 victim survivors will report to the police. So those numbers should really be times by 5 to get a real true reflection of the true figures of what's happening in Leeds. So there's an average of about 444 per week throughout the pandemic, but where it was at its peak, those figures rose to 533 week beginning the 27th of July. Now that could be a combination of people coming out of lockdown, and also that the warmer weather happened and people were therefore able to be freely out and about, and more people tend to drink when it's a lot warmer as well. And unfortunately, we are seeing that the highest volume wards are Bermontoffs and Richmond Hill, Gipton and Hare Hills, and the inner south, Middleton Park as well. Now, what we don't want to see is the incidence of repeat calls. And what we mean by repeat calls is where there's been a further incident between the same couple within a 12-month period. And sadly, those numbers have gone up since quite recently, and certainly throughout the pandemic. Even though interventions may have been put in place, we've seen a bit of a rise. It's risen by about 8% in terms of repeat calls, and that's where there's been further incidents of violence. Around 27% have had a child present, so that child has been in that home and they are witnessing domestic abuse. And any child that witnesses domestic abuse is classed as a victim of child abuse as well. And I'll go on to talk a little bit more about children when we come to the changes in the domestic abuse bill. And there's been a rise in high-risk incidents of violence, so that's gone up by 1% currently from our previous incidents. Now, we know that those figures are just the tip of the iceberg, but we know that there are also sort of barriers for people to report incidents of abuse. So we know that because of fear, shame, and many other issues, people might be reluctant to report and seek help from the police as well. Just to say that those wards in particular, they sort of year on year seem to be the same wards that are seeing the highest number of cases in the city. Could I have the next slide, please? So here's a snapshot of the police reports in the city as a whole, but also in the 3 ward areas for Inner East. And as you can see that sort of year, at the moment, we don't have the full figures for the current year, but these are the numbers that we're seeing currently in Bermontoft, Richmond Hill, Gipton and Harehills, and Killingbeck and Seacroft. Can I have the next slide, please? So the Inner East comparisons have shown that on average, the numbers have moved over the course of the year. So, and this has obviously had an impact due to the pandemic and coronavirus on the city. But just want to note that there are slightly different trends in terms of increase within the 3 different wards, where some have decreased and some have actually increased within those throughout the year. Next slide, please. And these are the types of incidents that we've seen in the city as a whole, and also in the 3 wards that we're talking about. So, as you can see in there, the figures are quite similar to the average number of cases of violence across the whole of the city, and in terms of verbal disputes, we're either sort of above the city average, or we're just about hitting very close to the city average. In terms of other types of abuse, that could be in the form of sexual abuse, or it could be in the form of emotional or psychological abuse. So the current arrangements that we've got in the city are what's called the MARAC. If people are not familiar, it's a multi-agency risk assessment conference. And for the year 1920, we are looking at sort of trying to have the updated data for the current year, but there were 3,725 new cases that were heard at MARAC. So MARAC is a multi-agency arrangement where a daily meeting is held with around 15 both statutory and third sector partners, and we discuss all cases of very high risk violence or any medium risk cases which had a crime that was associated to that. And we do see those numbers go up each year, and we do see that again as a positive, because it means that organisations and victim survivors feel confident about reporting that abuse to either their support agency or to the police. And around 80% of referrals do come from West Yorkshire Police, with around 40% from the communities. Again, as I mentioned, we don't want to see repeat cases going up, which unfortunately there has been, and unfortunately the number of children that were witnessing that abuse has also gone up year on year. So domestic homicides in Leeds is a statutory function that is carried out by the community safety team, and that statutory responsibility sits with the Safer Leeds domestic violence team. And sadly, there have been 26 domestic homicides since reporting first began in 2011. So 20 of those met the criteria for a domestic homicide review to be carried out. And it's a bit like it is an investigation where we scope agencies across the city that may have been working with the victim, the children of that household, if there were any, and also the perpetrator. And we collate all the positive responses and set up what's called a review panel. From that, we then sort of try to identify what were the events that led up to that the murder or the death of that victim, and what were the more commonly, what were the missed opportunities for intervention that organisations could have used to try and prevent the fact of the case happening. So just to break down, 22 out of the 26 victims were women. 11 of those were over the age of 50, and out of those 11, 4 of them were over the age of 60. 5 of those victims were from Black, Asian or minority ethnic backgrounds. 1 was a suicide. 4 were domestic homicide suicides, so that's where the perpetrator has killed their partner or family member and then gone on to end their own life. And sadly, 5 children have also been killed alongside their mother. What we do after after we've carried out the review, it's sent to the Home Office for approval, and then we publish that on our website for people with their names redacted. But what we do then as a team is to share that learning across agencies for organisations to implement recommendations in their own organisations, to change policies or to change their own internal procedures, to learn from those missed opportunities that to prevent that happening to any other person. We're finding that sadly, there has been a recent homicide in the Hare Hills area just sort of last year, and we are sort of recently just started the procedure for, because it has hit the criteria for a domestic homicide review. So we are in the process of collating any positive responses from organisations, and that includes schools as well. Now, we want it not to be sort of a blame culture, so no actual individual within an organisation or an organisation themselves should be blamed for that person's death. The only person that is accountable for that is the person that's carried out that act themselves. Some of the lessons that we've learned from previous domestic homicides has been around not recognising the emotional and psychological abuse of coercive and controlling behaviour. So we are trying to get that across in all our training and trying to raise more awareness around the insidious nature of coercive and controlling behaviour, and not just looking at physical abuse as the main type of abuse that victims can become can have that inflicted on them. Things like sharing information has been really key, and I know people try to ensure that they maintain confidentiality through GDPR, but where risk is concerned, that overrides consent. So when I'm delivering training, I always do mention that I would rather stand up in court and say I breached confidentiality, but it meant that I saved somebody from serious harm or potential death. So we then share all that key learning, and as I said, then organisations are there to try and implement those changes. So could I have the next slide, please? So coronavirus. So as we know, overall numbers that actually sought help fell during March and April in Leeds as such. But we know that they rose to a peak in July. And as I said, that could have been due to the fact that people were not in lockdown, and also that, sorry, could we go back a slide, please? Thank you. So they weren't under lockdown, and that the warmer weather could have contributed to people having that more culture of drinking. And it went up again towards the end of November. What we did see nationally was that during the first 3 weeks of the original lockdown in March, sadly there were 16 homicides that also included 2 children, but that was nationally, not in Leeds, thankfully. But any death is unacceptable. But we haven't seen that trend prevalent throughout the pandemic. So issues that we did discover were that, and certainly for Leeds, the Leeds area, was that the refuge was very full. And so alternative approaches to accommodation had to be found. Now, it was really difficult for the refuge service in Leeds, because people had to remain in their accommodation for COVID restrictions. So move on from refuge was very limited, and people were unable to move into accommodation. So those that were on the social housing register were prevented from obviously bidding for council properties. However, one thing that we did do was introduce what was called the emergency lettings panel. And that was a really innovative meeting whereby members of the housing department and came together, and I think they were twice a week. They used to put an emergency lettings panel together, and they would then offer a property to people at the highest risk. And that meant that that there was more move on from refuge. The alternatives that we found were the government incentive to put people into hotels, empty hotels during the pandemic. Support to perpetrators was also limited due to social distancing. So the programs that were in place, such as Caring Dads, ended up having to be done via online, which isn't ideal because it's a group exercise where perpetrators who do want to modify their behaviour rely on having group work or one-to-one work. And we also found that hidden harm was more likely to be significant. And some of the triggers for that was that more people were furloughed, some people had lost their jobs, so the triggers to people being in a confined space for longer, people being further isolated, or victims being further isolated, and the pandemic curtailing people's access to support was really key, whereby victims weren't able to speak to organisations or leave the property to talk to family and friends about the abuse that they're experiencing, for fear that the perpetrator was in the same property and listening in to all telephone conversations. Have the next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot in the months before the pandemic, where we had around 400 reports made to West Yorkshire Police. But this chart shows the trend over the period since the restrictions were first introduced. So as we know, sort of the highest number of calls were week commencing the 27th of July. And again, they started to hit a peak in November, where on average the police received 60 calls per day, where in that time they received around 74 calls per day, whereby the domestic violence and abuse was the biggest police call out in terms of all types of crime. Could I have the next slide, please? So this gives a breakdown of the current partnership that we have. So we have which I'll come to talk about a little bit more later on, about what we've done since the pandemic. But this just gives a bit of a flavour of the number of calls to West Yorkshire Police, the calls to Leeds Domestic Violence Service, how many MARAC referrals were made during April to September this year, how many people approached Leeds Housing Options where they cited domestic violence and abuse as their main reason for approach, and the number of refuge spaces that were available throughout that time. And finally, the children's social work services, where domestic violence and abuse was the primary contact for social workers. One thing that we did manage to ensure that continued throughout the pandemic was Operation Encompass. If people haven't heard about that, it's an initiative whereby for every high-risk case, that involved a child, the school was informed and a notification went to the child's school just to alert the teachers and head teachers and their pastoral care to keep an eye out on the child and make sure that the child also had some form of support as well. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so that moves on to the current activity that we've got in sort of the Inner East area. So as a team, we promote what's called the Domestic Violence and Abuse Quality Mark, and that's like an accreditation that organisations across the city can apply for, and it's a self-assessment which includes training that's delivered by our team, and we encourage all organisations to apply for the quality mark, and they self-assess themselves on standards such as are they approachable, do they have the staff knowledge on how to deal with a disclosure, how do they work with victims, how do they work with perpetrators, and how do they work with children, how do they work with vulnerable members of society, and so on. And it's a 3-year accreditation, and currently the organisations in this in Inner East that are working towards or have achieved the quality mark. So housing have worked towards it. Leeds Antisocial Behaviour team are currently working towards the quality mark. The Refugee Council, which is a migrant and refugee organisation that supports refugees. PAFRAS is Positive Action for Asylum Seekers, is another organisation. Path Yorkshire, they also are working through this. The Refugee Forum, RETAS, GIPSIL, and Care and Repair, and the Leeds City Council Community Hubs are all working towards this accreditation. There are 2 organisations that have had the quality mark but are now due for review. So they've had the quality mark for 3 years, and we just refresh the review, and that's Shantona and Space 2, which is in the LS14 area. So in addition to that, we've also provided a lot of training for GP practices in and around the area, the whole of the city. And currently around 39 GP practices across the city have been trained on what's called routine inquiry. So routine inquiry is whereby we ask every female patient over the age of 16 who presents on their own whether they're experiencing domestic violence and abuse, and it's with the intention that then the GP signposts them to the commissioned service. So the GPs that have currently been trained are Park Edge Practice, Windmill Health Centre, Roundhay Road Surgery, the Garden Surgery, Lincoln Green Medical Centre, Bellbrook Surgery, and Dr. Taylor and Partners, which was formerly Shaftesbury Surgery. There are some GP practices that we have tried to encourage, but we're just finding it a little bit difficult. And naturally, you know, all health sector workers are going to be, we understand and completely, you know, accept that they're got their hands full with the pandemic and certainly now with the COVID vaccine. But we are still looking to work with the Grange Medical Centre, Foundry Lane Surgery, Shakespeare Medical Practice, and Ashfield as well. We've also got some early help hubs that have been established by Leeds City Council's Children's Services, and we have a domestic violence coordinator that are based in each of those hubs. So there is one for Inner East and one for Inner West and Inner South as well. So they work really closely with our team and have done a lot of work around supporting the Seacroft Local Care Partnership with all the amazing work they've done. So I have to say a big shout out to Anna, who works in the Seacroft Local Care Partnership, and you know, a huge thank you to Councillor Jenkins as well, who supported all that work that's happened in Seacroft. So it's a joined up team that's working to approach. It's mainly like local support for local people, and it's in conjunction with all the local communities in the area, and that includes third sector organisations, housing, primary care, the NHS healthcare services, and also children's and adult social care as well. And within that structure, they've developed what's called the Seacroft Design Group. And that's a multidisciplinary team, I'm told, that's been taking a really proactive approach to enable and influence the sort of the wider local care partnership as well. So some of the work that they've done is to deliver lots of training sessions and workshops, particularly around the 16 days of action that starts on the 25th of November right through to the 10th of December. So there was workshops and training on MARACs, on stalking, on coercive control, and just as a basic introduction to domestic violence and abuse as well. And the partnership is looking at 4 themes. So they started off looking at sort of the mental health of the community, and what they recognise that there's a lot of correlation between mental health and domestic violence and abuse. So they chose domestic abuse as their sort of area of work to focus on. So the 4 themes that they're working on is currently training and workshops, community engagement, local organisations and business engagement, and also communications as well. But they recognise there's lots of work still to do, and we kind of very hot off the press this morning, Anna and I have had a meeting where we are looking towards creating a group of community ambassadors, and we'd like to pilot that at this early stage because it's literally hot off the press, and that's whereby local businesses and local people have expressed an interest in becoming an ambassador in their own community. So for example, hairdressers in the area have said that they would like to become trained to recognise those signs and indicators in their clients that they see, to be able to then signpost them. So we will look at a kind of a model that we will pilot in the Seacroft area to start with, and once we evaluate that, then we'll look to roll that out in other areas as well. Some of the other things that we've got in the Inner East area that there is a honour-based abuse and forced marriage steering group which I sit on, and there are strategic partners across the city that are involved in that. There was a citywide pledge that was signed on behalf of Leeds City Council by Councillor Cooper, and we've got a strategic citywide action plan that we are currently working towards. And one of the actions within that was that we had a campaign during the month of December, which was a campaign on Fever FM, which is a local radio station that gave information updates every day, about 8 times a day, in both English and Urdu, around seeking support if anybody was experiencing honour-based abuse and or forced marriage as well. Could I have the next slide, please?
Sunita, is there much more to go through? Because we've got other councillors who want to ask questions. I'm not hurrying you up in a sense, but I am.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be as quick as I can. So really quickly, in terms of COVID responses, so as soon as COVID lockdown first started, we created, as part of Safer Leeds, we created a tactical group which had was a strategic way of monitoring activity and the trends over the sort of lockdown period. That included sort of campaign messages that were tweeted on the Safer Leeds platform. I'm trying to think of things that I can keep out. The MARAC is obviously ongoing, so that's a daily meeting that addresses all high risk. And the strategic developments in terms of the front door is the only operational arm for our team, because we work more strategically rather than operational. But we've got a few members of our team that chair those MARAC meetings as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of governance arrangements, people may have heard about the new domestic abuse bill that's currently through the House of Lords at the moment. And that has been a huge opportunity for lots of organisations, and it's a bit of a landmark piece of legislation that's going to be introduced for the first time, and it's going to introduce a statutory definition of domestic violence and abuse. And as part of that, each tier 1 local authorities have to have what's called a local partnership board that will be focusing on a needs assessment, and that's looking across the city around the accommodation provision for victims and both children as well. But it places a new statutory duty on local authorities to do that. So in Leeds, we are a bit ahead of the trend. We're not expected to do that before the bill comes into force, but we have created that local partnership board, and it replaces the previous domestic violence programme board that we used to have. Next slide, please. So some of the other key changes, as I mentioned, is a statutory definition of domestic violence and abuse. Councillor Reagan, would it be easier if I just forwarded you some fact sheets about the bill so that I don't have to go through this?
Yeah, if you can forward them to Ruth, and then Ruth will pass them on to all the members that are present.
Okay, that's not a problem. I'll just skip through this one then. Next slide, please. So yeah, this just brings me sort of to an end to be able to then just sort of steer the conversation. So, you know, if anybody's got any questions at this stage, I'm just hoping that, you know, these questions that we've put up there is just to stimulate some conversation about how best we can support you to sort of raise awareness in your respective areas around domestic violence and abuse, or replicate some of the really good work that's happening in Seacroft at the moment.
Lovely,
so
thank
happy
you
for any questions.
Thank you, Sunita, for that very, very detailed report, and it really is an insight. Can I ask people to raise their hand? I've got one question prior to opening it up to members, and it's if that work within the Seacroft LCP is doing really good work and is getting numbers down of domestic violence cases, and it's supporting that, how can we as a community committee make that happen in our other LCP areas, as in Gipton and Harold's and Bermondsey and Richmond?
Yeah, I kind of anticipated that question, Councillor Reagan, so thank you for that. So the reason why that work's happening in Seacroft at the moment is because the local care partnership chose domestic abuse as their kind of theme to work on, because recognising the correlation it had with mental ill health as well. So I'm not sure what the other areas have chosen in terms of their local care partnerships, or what theme that they're working with. But it's more, you know, I can work really closely with Anna, and because some of the work has already been set up, it's looking at replicating it and working with her equivalent in each of the areas to try and duplicate some of that really good practice.
I mean, it's just that we, you know, Bermondsey, Richmond Hill and Gipton and Harold's have got the highest amount of domestic violence cases, so therefore it needs some strategic action to get those down, doesn't it, and to support the people. I've now got Salma Arif, and then I've got Councillor Asghar Khan.
Thank you, Chair. Sunita, thank you for that presentation. I've got two questions for you. Since 2011, the slide said there have been 26 homicides. What I'd like to know, if it's possible, you may not have this information in front of you, is how many of those were sort of in our 3 wards in the East? It's just backing up what the Chair has said. You know, if the homicides are also higher in our neck of the woods, then, you know, we need to have the strategic action anyway, but we can back that up to say homicides are also happening in our ward. And the second question I've got, first of all, comment about the campaign you did on Fever FM and reaching communities who perhaps won't have English as their first language. Fever FM is great, and it really does get to the South Asian community quite well. I am worried though about the Gypsy Roma communities that we've got and the recent numbers that we've had in our communities. A lot of the women don't speak English and perhaps don't necessarily know or have the connections to get the support that they need. Are we doing any work with them? Just wanted to make sure that they also know where to get the support.
Yeah.
Just before you answer that,
Okay, thank
Sunita,
you.
can you keep hold of that, and we'll ask the other two. I've got 2 indications, and we take them, and then you can answer the whole 3 of the questions. Is that okay? Asger, do you want to ask your question?
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Anita, for your excellent report as well, presentation. Just following from the Chair, I represent Birmingham Richmond Hill with the Chair and the Councillor Graham, and I'm surprised and shocked actually to see those numbers, are the really, really high numbers. And then when you said in other organisations, like other wards, like such as Gipton, Hare Hills and Killingbeck Seacap, there's organisations already working on DVA. How come we've got highest number in our ward and there's no organisation working on Leeds? Can I ask you to take this away, and if you can get us some plan of action, how we can get those numbers down and support those victims in Birmingham Richmond Hill? And the other one is, second question is regarding BAME. Do you think, is there any underreporting from BAME groups within those 2 wards? Because we've got a large number of diversity people, different people living in those wards, and there's only 5%.
Thank you. Salma, do you want to, sorry, Ron, do you want to ask your questions, Ron, Councillor Graham?
I just want to put this through to the meeting. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, yes.
The thing here, with all this information that's been delivered tonight, I'm absolutely gobsmacked as regarding what's being told there and informing us here tonight and not knowing about half of it, you know what I mean? I want to know why we haven't been informed about this more at the tasking meetings that we attend, and more by the people in the housing department that actually have a responsibility to the people who they look after on the estates and what have you. I'm really concerned now about what I've heard tonight, I'm telling you now.
Thank you. Sunita, do you want to answer those questions if you can?
Yeah, so in response to Councillor Arif, unfortunately, I don't know the full number of the domestic homicides that have occurred within the Inner East, other than the 2 that I am aware of recently. So there was one, as I mentioned, quite sort of towards the end of last year, and we are currently scoping that. And I personally am leading that domestic homicide review as the officer from our office. And there was another one in Hare Hills area, which we have progressed a little bit further, but I can certainly get back to you on the numbers by literally going through them, and if that's okay, Councillor Arif. And in terms of Gypsy Roma traveller communities, towards this year, I have spoken directly to Georgina Bright, who at the time was the manager of the Gypsy Roma traveller team in the area. And we know that there is high prevalence in sort of like the Cliftons and Knowles areas and Hare Hills as a whole. So they were going to be working towards the quality mark. So some of the staff have already received training on how to identify signs and indicators of domestic abuse. Some of their staff are people from that community themselves, so you know it's beneficial that they can speak the language as well. But due to COVID, that obviously fell kind of by the wayside, and there has been some changes in staff management as well. So Georgina has gone back to the youth service, and that's now been taken over by a different staff member. So I will endeavour to get in touch with them again and look at working towards the quality mark. But if you've got any recommendations of anybody else that I could speak to, I'm more than happy to have that conversation.
Lovely. We'll get that to you through Liz Jarman, I think, from our head of Stronger Communities, and we'll look at it that way. Can you answer the question or comment on the issue that Councillor Graham's put forward?
Unfortunately, I'm not part of the tasking group, so I can't really answer that question as to why you haven't been informed about this already. We're quite fortunate that the police intel teams sit within Safer Leeds, and we are able to get that get the data from them, which I got literally last week. It might be something that you ask for on a regular basis as part of your tasking meetings, but if there's anything we can do to try and support that, I'm happy to have conversations again with our intel team. Obviously, data like this is very sensitive, and I've been able to share this, but on the whole, we don't share this kind of data that widely as such. In terms of Councillor Asgar.
Sorry, I thought you'd answered the Councillor Cairns' questions. Have you not?
No, not yet.
Right, come on.
Councillor Asgar's asked whether organisations in Bermontoffs or Richmond Hill. So Councillor Asgar, we kind of rely on organisations wanting to be accredited and go for these quality marks and to receive the training. And if we approach certain organisations, we will obviously try so hard, so much, but then if those organisations don't want to engage or don't want to be, or don't have the capacity to go through the quality mark, then we can't literally force them. If I can, I'll try and see which organisations we've approached in the Bermontoffs and Richmond Hill area, and happy to get back to you on that to see whether they might need a little bit of a nudge.
Lovely. I think the issue is, Sunita, isn't it, that I think ward members are very, very frustrated in the sense of if Bermontoffs and Richmond Hill and Gipton and Harold's have got high numbers of this domestic violence taking place, and we have got within those two wards, we've got a high percentage of BAME residents in there that possibly aren't quick in coming forward in reporting that. And if we've got schemes actually working with the local care partnerships in Killingbeck and Seacroft, then I think that's the way forward for our other two wards. And I think we need to echo some of that work that's going on in that Seacroft partnership, if we can bring that down. And I think it's ideally for Councillor Khan as the representative for the other local care partnerships to try and take that work on. Liz, do you want to come in? Liz?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to alert the committee that these issues have not gone unnoticed. We have in our programmes of work and already agreed with colleagues in Safer Leeds that we will work on them around identifying local organisations who we can work with around the quality mark. So we can certainly pick that up with Sunita, and we have already identified work that we want to do with young people and children that may have been affected by domestic violence across the committee area, and also looking at how we can work more closely with the local care partnerships to make sure that the excellent work that's taking place in Seacroft and Killingbeck is replicated elsewhere. So please don't think that that's gone unnoticed. It's in the work programme, councillors, and we will be picking that up.
Lovely. Well, thank you, Sunita. I can't see any more indications of questions, and thank you. It's been a very emotive subject, and it's one that we.
Chair, can I just come back on your last comment? Yes, I do attend the LCP partnership meetings, but I only attended about 3 meetings. I think you was the chair. You used to attend.
No, I'm not saying that you have to do it. What I'm saying is it's an ideal opportunity, Asger. An ideal opportunity.
Yeah. I'm happy to take it away, and hopefully with the LCPs, I will echo and make sure we put it on our agenda, especially for those 2 wards, and make sure how we can help them as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. Yeah, lovely. Moving on then.
And
so thank
anything
you,
that we
Sunita.
can do to support that, we're more than happy.
Yeah, thank you for attending.
Sorry, I was just going to say anything we can do to support that, we will do.
Yeah, I acknowledge that, and thank you for your attendance. It's been well received. So thank you.
Thank you everyone.
You can
Good
leave
evening.
if you want now. Good evening. Yeah. Moving on then now to agenda item 11, finance report. Ruth, can I ask you to present the finance report?
Thank you, Councillor Wigan. I think it's actually area update report first.
Well, it's not on my script. It's not on my script. On my script, it was.
We got finance first. Which would you? Am I okay to do area update report first? Just because we've got a couple of officers here that are going to talk. So that's so. First, we're just going to look at area update report. So it starts on page 17 of your agenda pack, and the chair's asked that I take the majority of the area update report as read, but we do have a couple of officers here to talk to some specific areas of the report. So the first one is Susan Hardy, who's service manager from the Cleaner Neighbourhoods team, and in terms of the report itself, that's paragraphs 11 to 15 on pages 19 to 20, which provide a summary of the recent figures and work undertaken by the Cleaner Neighbourhoods team. And Susan's just going to give us a quick sort of verbal update now on some of the key areas of work across Inner East that they've been working on recently.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Obviously, there's a table in the report at point 11. That's quite old data now, unfortunately, because that was presented to the meeting back in December. But the figures, I've looked at the figures today, the trends are still the same. So comparing sort of like September to November, the 3 months in 2019 to the same 3 months in 2020, you'll see that unfortunately the lines don't marry up for some reason. I'm not sure why, but I'll just do some quick highlights. Obviously, I'm conscious of time. Just on the fly tipping, you'll see in all three area wards from 2019 to 2020, they've gone down quite considerably, the referrals from the public. So fly tipping referrals have gone down quite considerably there. In relation to bulky collections, they've gone up slightly. So I've had quite a few referrals on bulky collections, as you would expect through, following the lockdown and the suspension of bulky waste in gardens did go up, but we do have all our enforcement officers back working. So, they've been doing some sterling work. They have been going out with the right risk assessments in place and safe working instructions. And we've been working particularly in Hare Hills on a lot of waste in gardens, and members have been getting regular updates about what work we've been doing in there. The courts are back up and running. The courts were closed for quite some considerable time. So we had lots of prosecutions sat in the courts waiting for deliberations. They've now started to churn through the machinery, and we're getting some really, really good results. We've had a recent press release in Gipton and Hare Hills on some of the fines for bins on streets and prosecutions for wasting gardens, etc., and fly tipping, and we're getting some really, really good results on those. As others start to come through in other wards, obviously we'll let members know what they are and what sort of fines people are getting. We did some clean-up events in Gipton and Hare Hills and Bermtoft and Richmond Hill towards the end of last year. We did a full month of clean-up events, worked really closely with the members in those wards, and the clean-up events were joint ones between Refuse and the Gully teams. We have been doing some really close work with Refuse recently, especially through the pandemic, because waste has gone up quite considerably because obviously more people are at home, and we've had quite a lot of side waste as well. So tonnage, I know John Woolmer reports that tonnage has gone up quite considerably especially on the black waste areas. In relation to the service itself, in the report it mentions about the CEV staff and how when lockdown measures eased, CNT were able to get back to sort of business as usual in the zones. Obviously we're back in lockdown again, so we have got the staff back who are clinically extremely vulnerable shielding again. So we are still zonal working, but in the current lockdown procedure we've had to let staff go home to shield again. We are running services quite slightly differently again, because some of the safe working instructions we need to work to make sure people are safe through the COVID pandemic have kicked in again. So simple things like we're only allowed 2 members of staff in a vehicle. They have a screen between them, so it does play out in operational service where we're limited sometimes to what we can do. We are still delivering the majority of services which are priority. Fly tipping, bulky waste collections are still operating, the household waste sites are still open, and as I say, we're working really closely with refuse as well. So you know, if priorities do change, obviously John and Jason will let us know, but in your areas everything's still business as usual at the moment. And bins, obviously we're emptying bins on streets as well.
Not today because of the snow.
Not today because of the snow, no. I mean, we did have staff out early doors, but obviously the snow just scuppered that. We have diversified today, so we've been working really closely with the highways on gritting. So we've deployed some staff to help on that. We were out this morning. First thing, we'd already planned this anyway this week. We've been working on the gritting at the COVID centres and the vaccination centres, and obviously all the sheltered housing, and staff continued to work there until the point, obviously, it became too dangerous to be able to do that. And obviously COVID centres were saying, and vaccination centres were saying to older residents especially, please don't come today and just book your appointments. So we have got the same out tomorrow. Staff will come in as normal tomorrow, and they will go out gritting with highways. So we've got that really close working relationship with them as well. That was it for me. If anybody's got anything particularly they want to raise in relation to their areas.
Councillor Jenkins and Drinkwater, is it on this particular aspect with Susan?
Yeah, mine is, yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Go on then,
Okay.
David.
All right, so very quickly, just say we had a very good session at the Ram's Heads cleaning up just before, might have perpetrated the COVID situation. So we that went really well. So one quick just thing is that chart is quite difficult to look at. I wonder if it could, but it is really good in terms of the information. If it could be put together in a better way and updated.
I will get you some more up-to-date information. I'll get you the last 3 months of information and the last 3 months of last year to do a comparator, and I'll get it aligned so it actually reads across properly as well. So I'll do that, no problem.
And just to say that we had a session about the Your Voice today, which is like the new tenants communication website, and I think it might be good to be able to put that onto there.
Yeah. Okay.
That was through the housing advisory panels. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Drinkwater.
Yeah, I'm finding it impossible to get waste collected from little pockets of woodland that we've got in Killingbeck and Seacroft. If it's by the side of the road, it seems like it's very easy to get it collected, but as soon as it's in one of these pockets of woodland, it seems to get passed between yourselves, parks, countryside, housing, community payback. And you know, at one point I was waiting 18 months for 7 mattresses and a load of large items to be collected from Lowood, and I just went out myself and dragged them to the side of the road. So just wondered if you could comment on that and the disjoint between, it feels like there's a disjoint between the departments, really.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously had some dialogue about that at the time, Councillor Drinkwater, and you know, some of the things that I was raising around the safe working instructions and the risk assessments that staff have in place and the accessibility to some of those areas. And I know we had the dialogue around you did go into those areas and pull those out, but obviously we've got really strict guidelines that we need to follow, so it's not always easy. We did meet as well previously when Helen Freeman was here around some of that disjoint with other service areas and other departments. If there's particular areas that you're struggling to get, you know, somebody to actually attend, where the parks are batting it to us or we're batting it to housing, let me know and I'll get those sorted for you. So just let me know the particular areas. But as I say, we are still in a global pandemic. We've still got staff numbers that are low, and we are prioritising particular services. And we're still trying to run the bulky waste service, because we know that if we run that, it alleviates some of the fly tipping issues. But if there's particular areas you want me to look at, just send me the details and I'll look at it with you.
Thank you, Susan. Councillor Graham. Councillor Graham.
Can you hear me now, Denise?
Yeah.
What I'd like, Denise, is a map to tell me for both sides of all the wards where the grip bins are located. How many is there? And if the private ones come into the reckoning as well, we need to know where they are as well, that we paid for, if we have paid for them anyway. Where the grip bins are located. After my question before the end of the year, I asked about 50 grip bins to be placed around the ward before this period of time. And today's a perfect example where I don't even know where they are, working and what have you, know what I mean, right? And where the bins are.
Susan, is that your particular services remit?
No, it's not. No, I mean the grip bins fall in different areas, but we don't actually put the grip bins out and we don't fill them. So highways put certain grip bins out. Obviously, ward-based monies pay for certain grip bins, so they're done through the community committees. But then the housing puts them out as well. So we don't get involved in the grip bins.
So Liz, can I ask you to contact highways and see if we can get that information out to all the committee members, so that we know exactly where our grip bins are in our 3 wards, please?
Thank you, Denise.
Anybody got any more questions for Susan? I can't see any indications on that. Ruth, you want to carry on?
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Susan, for the report.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So just carrying on in terms of the area update report, and the second area of the report that we're just going to highlight is paragraph 37 to 40, which relates to the Touchstone Loves Food project. So Darren D'Souza has very patiently stayed with us through the meeting, just to give a quick update on the project and the work that Touchstone are doing across Inner East, particularly in relation to food supplies and sort of food distribution and stuff across Inner East. So Darren, over to you.
Okay. How long do you want me to speak for? Because I can edit.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. That's all right.
No, just be as quick as you can, really.
Yeah. So just to introduce myself, I do work for Touchstone. I'm the Community Health Development Manager for Touchstone, and that basically means I look after a lot of our public health contracts. So that includes Mentally Healthy Leeds, Better Together, East Leeds Health for All, and Your Space. And I noticed there's an update in your papers today on those projects. So back in March, we were very aware that the thing that people worried about was not being able to feed their families. So as soon as we were aware of the issue and the first national lockdown started, we delivered some food out to people, and we set up overnight what eventually became Touchstone Loves Food. When we started, we first of all started by getting referrals from Touchstone services across Leeds, but then as the community care hubs were set up, we became partners as part of the Chapel Allerton hub and the Birmingham Tops and Richmond Hill hub. Leeds MENCAP, as you probably are aware, were the lead partner for Birmingham Tops and Richmond Hill. Recently, in fact, from the 1st of January, we are the lead partner. We are the partner delivering the Chapel Allerton hub, but we are still working citywide, and we're still very much working across the Inner East area, including Gipton, Hare Hills, and Killingbeck and Seacroft. So if I can give you some numbers, just to give you an indication of the scale of things, and I guess the overall point I want to make is that we got we got some referrals through the hubs, but the amount of work we did from referrals from other sources very much outweighed the work we've done through the hub referrals itself. Just to give you a flavour, overall, this is from March 25th to the 2nd of December, when we pull this data together. We delivered around about 166,803 meals, to people across Leeds. And just to break that down, 50,000 of that was to Bermondsey Richmond Hill residents, and 21,600 to residents in Gipton and Hare Hills. And for Killingbeck and Seacroft, it was 2,800. So that for us represents around about 36% of all our work in Touchstone Loves Food has been in the inner east area of Leeds. And just to give you an indication, 29% of the work we've done in Bermondsey and Richmond Hill has come from the hub. So 2/3 of the work have actually come from other referrals that we've had, so not from the hub itself. And I think what I take from that is that because of our local connections, because of the work we do, people have come to us for help and support. They haven't necessarily gone through the council welfare system to get to the support. And I say that it's not just us in Touchstone. There are lots of organisations supporting people who haven't necessarily gone through the council welfare system. I don't know what else to say apart from, I don't think this is about food. It's been about mental health support. Food has been the vehicle for getting to people and supporting them. But actually the vast majority of what we've done is around mental health support. And just to give you an indication, for the first 12 weeks, we delivered 200 hours of intensive telephone support to people alongside delivering food. So it's been very much about that, showing people that we care, that someone's there for them, someone's there to listen, and signposting them to appropriate services within Touchstone and beyond. So unless you got any questions, that's my update.
I'd just like to thank you, Darren, and your particular organisation and your team, that you've done some excellent work in the 3 wards, and you know, you've been instrumental in getting that food and getting that mental health support to the people that need it. So a huge thank you to you and your staff, and if you can pass that on. Has anybody got any questions that they would like to raise with Darren? I've got Councillor Graham.
Darren, what can you hear me, Darren?
I can.
Darren, what I'm concerned about when you say that they came through the telephone system and the council's welfare support wasn't there, right? You know what I mean? And you use the mental health as the discussion as regarding how you come to help them. Can you tell me why the council's welfare department didn't respond then?
Sorry, I may have might not describe that very well for you. I'm not saying that I'm not saying the welfare support wasn't there. It's just that because of our local connections with people, the work that we'd done before COVID, they came to us for support before going to the council, because they've got a relationship with us, they've got the trust with us, and that was only magnified really through the pandemic. We still have people knocking on our door when we are open at Cromwell Mount. Yesterday there was a lady coming. She couldn't actually ring the council because she didn't have any credit on her phone, so she knocked on our door for help. So there's lots of reasons why people don't call the welfare support line, but I know when people have gone through that, they have got some really good support. So I don't want to infer that they didn't get support through them.
Councillor Khan. Councillor Khan?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Can hear you now.
Yeah, thank you. Darren, can I also thank you and your team for doing a fantastic work past 10 months now. And my question is, which part, I know you're based in Bermondsey Richmond Hill, and we're really fortunate to have Touchstone in Bermondsey Richmond Hill, and you're one of the great organisations. My question is, where was your most focused area? Was it across 3 wards, or was it just in Richmond Hill area? Or
do you mean for Bermondsey and Richmond Hill?
Yes.
Yeah.
And across the inner east as well. Was it just?
Yeah. I would say it's around the Bermontoft Lincoln Green area, really. But it's been quite spread out. So I mean, if I think about where we've delivered to, I mean, we've been to all parts of Leeds and certainly all parts of all three areas within the Inner East area. But Bermontofts is probably where I would say we do most of our deliveries. But I guess that indicates, just in terms of the where people live, the tower blocks there. We go out to Ebor Gardens, we go out to the Torres, Torrey Gardens, all over really. And of course, it still fluctuates. We're still supporting 250 odd people each week, and it was 450 people per week in this last summer. So there's still an extensive number of people that we are supporting on a weekly basis. I should say before I'm asked to leave, so say thank you for all your support, because we did start this with no money at all, no budget. Touchstone were very good at kind of putting money into this, but we did get some support very early on from you guys, councillors, and from the committee funds, and we've subsequently been able to apply for funding from the big lottery and from Barclays, and so we've brought in £180,000 to have a dedicated team to run Touchstone Loves Food, and we're one of the community care hubs as well, albeit for Chapel Allerton. We're able to continue that work really until probably around about November next year. So I'd just like to say thank you for trusting us and supporting us to get this started.
Thank you very much, Darren. Ruth?
Thank you, Darren. I think Darren's okay to leave, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. So in terms of the area update report, we've just got one final section to highlight, which I suppose is broadly sort of paragraph 57 to 105, which is the priority neighbourhoods target ward update. But more specifically, it's just that each ward within that update provided an update on the COVID-19 response and the COVID-19 hubs. But since the report's been written, there's been an update on the funding for those hubs, particularly so Ian Kenning from the Priority Neighbourhoods teams here this evening, just to kind of quickly update members on some of the new sort of funding streams that have come into the hub since the report was written.
Lovely. Ian, do you just want to keep it short and sweet, because members have had this copy for over a week now, haven't they? So they've been able to read up on all this. If you can just keep to the bits that haven't been in this report.
Okay, brilliant. I'll keep it really brief, Councillor Reagan. I know that members are fully up to speed with the community care volunteering hubs. It was just to give an update on a new funding package that's going to sustain the hubs in all three wards from January the 1st up until the 30th of June, so the first 6 months of this year. Funding has come in through central government when Leeds went into Tier 3, and some of that has been distributed in partnership with Voluntary Action Leeds to sustain the hubs across all the wards in the city. The three wards in Inner East are all in the sort of top tier in terms of demand. So they're getting the largest tranche of funding, which is basically 30,000 each, plus 10k, which is ring fenced for food, plus another just about a couple of grand also for food, but that sort of £2 varies slightly between wards, and it's dependent on how many people in the shielding cohort you have. I suppose the other change going forward is that Voluntary Action Leeds are, well, they've always been supporting the hubs, but they want to do some work with the hubs around just getting them to work a bit, well, exploring opportunities for partnership working, let's say that, just to see how the hubs can better support one another. So in a very practical sense, you know, some of the logistics of moving food around, or perhaps offering respite care when, you know, staff and volunteers need a break, that kind of thing. So I think it's a good news story for Inner East, because we know that we've got coverage across the whole patch. And although there's like lead organisations like Leeds, MANCAP, LS14 Catch, I know the reality in all 3 wards now is that there's actually many partnerships working around these hubs. So it's not just Leeds, MANCAP in Birmingham, there's a number of organisations. I know that's the same across all 3 wards. So the hubs are here until the end of June at least. That's, I guess, the update.
Thank you, Ian, for that. That's really good news for our communities. Does anybody have any questions relating to that particular item? No, I can't see an indication. So thank you for that, Ian. And if we have, we'll be in touch.
Pleasure.
Ruth?
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Ruth?
Councillor Regan. So I'm just going to move on now to the finance report. So the finance report in terms of the agenda pack starts on page 51, and it details wellbeing revenue, capital, community infrastructure levy and the youth activity fund for this financial year, so 2020 to 21. Paragraph 17 to 19, which are on page 53, provide a summary of the revenue allocations to date. And then on table 1, which is on page 54, you can see that a total of £215,393.93 has been allocated towards wellbeing projects during this financial year, and that leaves a balance of £43,251.69 remaining for the rest of this financial year. There's 6 wellbeing projects for members to consider, and they're starting on page 55, which is paragraphs 21 to 26. And there's also one supplementary item as well that's been circulated prior to the meeting, which Tasha mentioned earlier, under wellbeing. So members are asked to consider the projects and indicate whether or not they support them or not. So we'll start with Lincoln Green Planters. So that's a Housing Leeds project. Total project cost £2,780.19, and the financial request or the funding request from the wellbeing pot is £1,930.09, and it's to Bermondsey and Richmond Hill members, or rather Bermondsey and Richmond Hill ward, and the funding will be used for an environmental scheme, which is basically planters around Lincoln Green, Beckett Street and Cherry Row area. So if members can just indicate if they're happy to approve that one.
Can we take silence as
we can take silence. We can take a nod or a silence
as a recommendation,
yes.
And if anybody doesn't approve,
someone puts a hand up, yeah, perfect. The next one's Two Way Street, which is from Learning Partnerships. Total project cost £2,293. The request to the Wellbeing Fund is £1,528.67, and again this is a Bermondsey and Richmond Hill project, and it's for the Learning Partnerships. I'll work with primary schools across the ward and give them an opportunity to learn outdoors and be active and grow flowers and fruit and vegetables and various other kind of outdoor activities. So we're okay with that one. And the next one's Denby Trees. So this is trees at the Denby Flats in Gipton and Harehill. So it's a community team request. Total project cost £2,068, and the request to the Wellbeing Fund is £1,034. And funding will be used to plant new trees and planters in the communal green spaces at the Denby Flats in Gipton and Harehills. So we're okay with that one. And the next one's Virtual Hubs, which is East Leeds Community Sports Club. Total project cost is £4,100, and the request to the Wellbeing Fund is £2,800. This is Bermondsey and Richmond Hill as well, and it's basically using equipment and sort of support for virtual meetings for local residents, particularly older residents, to be able to meet up and sort of link up virtually during the coronavirus crisis. And the next one's temporary CCTV for Hazelwood Drive. So this is a Safer Leeds project, Leeds City Council project. So the total project cost is £1,488, and the total request to Bermondsey and Richmond Hill ward is £1,488, and this is to install temporary CCTV at Hazelwood Drive to tackle antisocial behaviour and criminality in the local area. So that one's okay. And then the final one on wellbeing is Premier League Kicks, which is from Leeds United Foundation. The total cost for that project is £46,000, and the request to the Wellbeing Fund is £10,000. And again, that's Bermontoft and Richmond Hill ward. And funding will be used to support the Premier League Kicks programme, which uses sort of football and sort of coaching skills throughout the year to kind of guide and mentor young children to build sort of social skills and confidence, and sort of improve in school and things like that. We're okay with that one. And then we've just got one, in terms of wellbeing, we've just got one final one, which was in the supplementary pack. So that was a supplementary item further to the original agenda. And that one is for the project development worker, which is a Leeds City Council internal communities team request. The reason that this one's come as a supplementary item is the fact that it's a paid role, so it's a role that would begin in the new financial year, so it needs to be approved now in order for the recruitment process to start for the role, and it's pre-approval from next year's budget, so it would be funding that's pre-approved from the 2021-22 financial year, so from the financial year coming up. So the total project cost for that is £55,736, and the request from the 2021-22 wellbeing budget, so from next year's wellbeing budget to be approved in principle, is £30,000, and the grant will contribute towards the total amount needed to fund a project development worker dedicated to the Killingbeck and Seacroft ward, and the role will bring about health improvements and tackle health inequalities and work towards a COVID-19 recovery in the Killingbeck and Seacroft ward. So we're okay with that one?
Yeah, Denise, can I come in here just quickly? Oh, 2 minutes. The one where the job description is for what you've just described there, the 50-odd thousand, and that. Can you let me have a copy of the job description then? Can you hear me, Ruth?
I can, Councillor Graham. I'm sure we'll be able to do that. So is it a job description for the role itself, for the for the project development officer role?
That's right. Yeah, love. Yeah.
Yeah, I can circulate that round to all members if that's helpful.
So what it's about, love. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No problem.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Denise.
Carry on, Ruth.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So just going back to the main body of the finance report, so just back to DDNs. So projects approved outside of the committee via DDN are highlighted on page 57, paragraph 27. So that's community food share. That's was for St Aidan's Church, and that was £1,937. Normount Hub furniture and equipment, £5,000. Life Connection After School Club, Bridge Street Church, that was £3,000, and then Zooms for Fun packages for one. Seacroft Community on top, and that was £10,833.75. So those were projects approved outside of committee because they were urgent. And then paragraph 2958. I'll run through this one quickly, Chair, because I know we're short on time, but that was just an update on one of the projects that has been approved by the committee, which is Bermontoft's Men's Wellbeing and Social Group. And what they've been doing is delivering weekly social sort of wellbeing groups for men in Lincoln Green and Bermontoft's. And the project itself was funded pre-COVID, so they initially started sort of meeting up face to face, in kind of going bowling and doing sort of different sort of face to face activities, which you can see on the report. And unfortunately, kind of as sort of time passed throughout last year, they weren't able to do that obviously anymore. But the group sort of successfully continued to sort of meet virtually via sort of Zoom and Skype and stuff like that. And I think it's a good example of how groups themselves have been able to adapt to the sort of landscape about how they meet up. Lots of groups have been really, really creative in how they've sort of continued the delivery through the coronavirus pandemic, and also how committee funding can be used to continue to support, you know, those activities virtually as well. So so that's a positive. And then I'm just going to move on to youth activity funds. So That's table 2, paragraph 6. And there's a total of £57,135.87 left in the YAF budget for this financial year, with a remaining, sorry, that was the spend. So there's £57,135.87 has been committed, and there is £9,911.09 remaining in the YAF budget, and there's no new YAF applications at this committee meeting. And then small grants and skips are detailed on table 3, and that's on page 61. And there's 10 projects that have been approved by the community committee over the last financial year, and there's still a budget remaining of £10,726.95. And then on the COVID-19 ward allocations, they're detailed in table 4, and that's page 61 and 62. So the Inner East Community Committee have funded 29 projects to date from their ward allocation of the COVID-19 funding, and there's still £13,270.11 left. The only thing just to point out about that one is that,
Ruth, can I just mention on that one, has there not been an injection of an extra 30k?
There has. You beat me to it.
Right,
so yeah, there's been additional £10,000 per ward that members will be aware of that's been allocated from central government. So it's central government funding, £10,000 per ward, £30,000 across the committee, and I think all wards now have had our request, and we're continuing to get requests to that pot. So that's essentially an injection, as Councillor Reagan says, of £30,000 from central government towards those coronavirus-related projects. And they will be reported on fully at the March committee meeting. So at the next committee meeting, we'll report on them fully. And then table 5, which is page 62, details the capital position. So there has been a capital injection since the last committee meeting of £2,100, and that's been split across all 3 wards. So that means that there is now a total balance of £94,322 remaining for new schemes against capital. And at this committee meeting, there are 2 capital projects to be considered. And they're starting on page 63, and it's paragraph 43 to 44. So the first one of those for members to consider this evening is the Seacroft Gardens Playground capital project. It's a parks and countryside request. The total project cost is £105,000, and the amount proposed to capital is £6,000, and it covers the Killingbeck and Seacroft ward. And funding will be used to move the play area at Seacroft Gardens back to its original setting, which means that there'll be a more level and open area and provide more easy access for the public to access the games area at Seacroft Gardens. So if members are okay with that one. And then the second one against capital for consideration is the Cycling Opportunities project, which is an active Leeds project. Total project cost £17,000. Amount requested or proposed from capital is £8,500, and that one's split between Bermontoft and Richmond Hill ward, and the request is £5,666.66 from Bermontoft and Richmond Hill, and Killingbeck and Seacroft, where the request is £2,833.34. And funding will be used to install cycle storage and purchase bikes and cycle equipment as part of an initiative to improve access to cycling in the 2 wards. So we're okay with that one. And then just finally, table 7 on page 64 outlines the community infrastructure levy, so the SIL funding. Just so that members can know that there's a balance of £71,961.19 available for new schemes, and there's no new SIL applications for members to consider at this meeting. And table 7 and table 8 on pages 64 and 65 are just for information, and they outline the wellbeing and YAF projects that have not yet been able to start as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's it from me, Chair, in terms of the finance report.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions on the finance report?
Ruth, it's a great report.
I can't see any indications in raising hands to ask for any questions on it. So just to echo what Councillor Graham's just said there, yes, it is a good report, and I think it highlights that there's some really good projects that the the 3 wards have managed to support and make happen in their particular 3 areas, and it's a good news for the residents and communities of Inner East that we're getting this money spent, and activities and organisations are benefiting from that. So that's really good. Are there any other items of business? I haven't been alerted to any other items. Have you had any other items of any other business, Ruth? I've got David wanting to come in. Is it regarding another item of business, David?
It's just very, very quick. The housing advisory panels, I think, are hopefully going to set up projects around vulnerable gardens. So it's just really to tell people that through Groundworks, there's a scheme that I think started in the Northwest, Horsforth or somewhere, and it's really to fund doing up people's who are vulnerable, doing up their gardens, doing hedge cutting and all sorts of things like that. So just to alert people that that might be a good project to support.
And is that in the in your particular HAP? It's not in the.
It's in outer, yeah, it's in the Outer East HAP, but I think it's covering about 7 HAPs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well noted. Anybody got anything else? No, I'd just like to say then thank you for your attendance, and the next date of the next community committee will be the 17th of March at 6 p.m. and thank you all for being here, and thank you to anybody that's tuned in via YouTube, and I hope you found it very very useful, and good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.